G'day traders, welcome to wrap up of Tuesday the 26th of June. So on the daily charts here, very similar situation to what we've had in the past. We're sitting below 1330, starting to get a little bit of momentum back to the downside. At some stage, if it wants, it could come back up and test this 1330 and maybe bounce off it and push down lower, and that would be a really strong confirmation of a downside. I think at the moment it's very much two-sided, which we've been getting a lot of lately. Just really expecting buyers and sellers to come in at some stage in a day, which is great for day trading and providing opportunities going both way. Looking at these charts, then it's just a matter of finding the relationship between the buyers and sellers and really discovering who is in control and just making sure always going with the trend, remembering the trend is your friend. I mean that's a very simple thing and everyone understands that, but just make sure you're constantly thinking that, and while this market's pushing down, should only ever be looking for sell trades. Then it starts to push up. At some stage around here, this pressure will start to change from a sell side to a buy side as far as price action is concerned. As it's approaching this bit of a previous little swing high here, as it's approaching there, that's when it really starts to change. And of course, when it starts pushing up here, really fantastic buying opportunities. So selling and buying, but just really make sure we're going with the direction. That's smart trading, and over time, even if it's just a simple trading strategy, you're going to start finding yourself building momentum. So to start off with, we had this little bit of a sideways period. The 1 minute chart shows it quite well. It just bounced between power points, and eventually now it's pushed to the downside and started breaking down. So really starting looking for some sort of selling opportunities around here. This has popped back. Just looking at the chart like this looks like a pretty good area to sell from. It's coming just back into the range where it started from after pushing lower. These areas typically hold and push down. But the thing about this, if you're seeing it live, the Russell and a few of the other charts were breaking really strongly to the upside and looked like it had a bit of pressure to really push through this area. So it was definitely one to be careful of, and always keep in mind the other charts or the other indices. They do a good job at showing what this market wants to potentially go. From there, it pushed lower, made new lows, and then once it starts coming back up like this, like I said, it was still on the downside here, looking for it to come back up into this range and show what it wants to do. The fact is here it's had a little push down and then started pushing up and breaking these swing highs. So all of a sudden now you can start to say, well, price action has changed from the downside to the upside, and maybe you can switch to looking at buying opportunities. From there, this market's pushed higher. It's made new highs. It's had it's come back here. It's held off really quite a strong support level. So you can see, if you look back through the market, you can see quite a distinct support level. Mainly the top of this and the bottom of this range over here. That's held and started pushing up. So that's confidence that these buyers are going to then go through and make new highs and push on and see where they go from there. After making new highs up here, then the market starts coming back again, looking to see what it does at support levels. So at no stage has it started breaking down and showing signs that the sellers are in control again. It's possible. You've got to start thinking it, but never consider the sell side until it's proven that it comes down, pops up, comes down again, and really confirms it. But this is still just buyer's pressure, and it's finished off in a bit of a sideways move there. But from anywhere from basically midday on, it's just all buying opportunities. From basically 10 o'clock on to maybe up until lunchtime, it should be looking more at the sell side of things. As for a closer look on this 1 minute chart, so you can see here bouncing around between power points. Again, watching the other markets, just trying to get confirmation of whether it's going to break down or break up. For myself, watching the markets, there's nothing really predictable here. Sometimes some of these power fades that eventually do work. So for example, the power fade on the downside worked here. Sometimes they become very predictable from watching the other markets. This particular one, not so much the case. It was a tough one. All the other markets were a bit 50-50. Some were pushing down, some were hanging a lot higher. So it wasn't a really high predictable area that's going to break. But once it starts to break, then you go, okay, that's confirmation of the downside. It's pushed a couple of points past this bit of a range here, looking for sellers to hold and continue to have their way. Pop back, held at this bit of a resistance level here, and then pushed down lower again. This is when they started popping up with quite some aggression. So this is a careful one. All the other marks are breaking high, but again, this area has held, and sellers were proving quite strong, and they've pushed down lower. This one might have been news influenced. I'm not sure. It happened very quickly. From there, we started to turn around to the upside now. So it's this little period here that kind of confirms the upside. We've come back, and this is where the sellers should go on if they're keen. But they've held and pushed high and started breaking up through here. This power fade, not a bad option to look at, especially if there's momentum and you're looking at the markets and you see other markets already applying pressure to this bit of a pivot point here. You've got to see it happening quite early, but if you're seeing that sort of thing, okay, well, this is going to go to this area and at least test, and even if it gets a little bit of a bounce and then goes, you've got enough room to absorb that bounce and push through and get the points. So not a bad power fade, that one. From there, pushing higher, quite a few power points in a row. This purple power point here, the market's quite extended and it came down quite heavy. Whether it holds or not is a little bit of a difficult one to decide on. But what you can say is there is a support level at 13.1050, which makes this purple certainly more valuable. If you look back through, low there, high there, the bottom of this range here, there's quite a distinct line through this market where now, if these buyers are quite true, they're going to look to hold around here and then push higher. Once they did that, this market pushing up through here and looking at some sort of buying opportunities up through here, is very likely, and that's what we call high percentage trading. That's where the odds are in your favour, because they've stamped out the sellers, held their ground and pushed higher, and they're not going to all of a sudden, well, I shouldn't say not, but it's a very high percentage that it's going to go there. It's not going to dismiss these sellers and all of a sudden push up here and then quickly start selling off again. The buyers have done a lot of work, and they're looking at going higher, and they're certainly in control, and that's what's happened. And most times they'll do that when you see a strong support level hold with such dominance in that area there. Once it started pushing higher, then we can see here we've had quite a decent drop. So I guess by this stage here, the buyers are still in control, but the fact of the matter is now this buy trend is quite extended, and maybe there's still buying opportunities, I suppose, but once it starts getting extended like that, I start looking at potentially the market showing signs that want to push down. But you've got to be very careful before you switch to the sell side. There certainly wasn't any information saying here that the sellers were coming in. We got this first push down here, but then they've popped up quite quickly back to these highs, and there's no power momentum on the downside. So sideways finish, and certainly wouldn't be looking at any sell trades, and difficult to take any buying trades in this particular area as well. You look at, I guess, something that you look at is this particular area here, because what it is, it's come back and it's looking to apply a pressure. We spoke about this live in the room, back to this high here. So if I show you two distinct areas just before we go, okay, so here's a bit of a high here. So the market's pushed up, we've got a new cash market high, the market comes back. You can see it's broken through that high really easy. If you go back and look at the other markets, they're all there as well and pushing through, and some of them are already well and truly past that point if you look at this equivalent area here. So a very likely chance of going higher. Fast forward to this little section, same thing. We've made a high, come back, the market's come up. This time it's stalled, gone sideways, and hasn't pushed through with any power or momentum. Now there's a big difference here. The other markets weren't all hanging around here, especially the Russell and Nasdaq sitting quite low, and that's why looking for potentially some sort of selling formation to show us that, yep, the buyers are kind of had enough, and maybe the sellers are going to come in and have a go. There's also a bit of downward pressure here, even though this is not confirming the downside by any means, but you can see coming back like this, there's more emphasis with the sellers, whereas back here, this is a powerful buyers move. Even though they're selling, the buyers held them and pushed up really quite strong. So two of the same areas, but very differently executed between the execution between the relationship of the buyers and sellers. So that's the sort of thing you really want to be always constantly looking for in the market. Give yourself gauge points, upper lower points, and watch what the other market's doing, and really establish this price action and the relationship between the buyers and sellers and who's in control, and always stick with the side that's in control. So that's a wrap up for Tuesday. I'll speak to you guys Wednesday.